The Frankenstein's monster of the arachnids, pseudoscorpions seem to be patched together with spare parts. The pincers of a scorpion, the body of a spider, the size of a mite. But did you know they can be milked? Welcome to the Insect Spotlight Project, a channel dedicated to shining a light on insects, spiders, and any other creepy crawlies that get left out of the ecologic spotlight. Today, we are talking about the order Pseudoscorpiones, often just called the Pseudoscorpions, though you will hear book scorpions or false scorpions from time to time. Pseudoscorpiones is an order within the class Arachnida, the arachnids. And though not as popular as their spider or scorpion cousins, they're found worldwide, with over 4,000 described species. So unless you live in Antarctica, they likely walk among you. Or perhaps we should say, you walk among them. They were definitely here first, with a fossil record stretching back 390 million years ago in the Devonian period. Pseudoscorpion phylogeny, or evolutionary history, has historically been a little messy. I sound like a broken record here, but arachnid phylogeny as a whole is pretty messy. However, we are pretty sure that Pseudoscorpion's closest relative, their sister group, is the Scorpiones, the scorpions. So that's at least a little easy to remember. We call the grouping of these two orders the Panscorpiones. Their name Pseudoscorpiones comes from this resemblance to their scorpion brethren. Pseudo, fake, pseudoscorpion, fake scorpion. You get the idea. If you want to know more about the true scorpions, I did a video a little while back, so you can click that link above. But back to the pseudoscorpions, let's talk about how to identify these little weirdos. Like other arachnids, pseudoscorpions have 8 legs and 2 tagmata, or body regions, the cephalothorax and the abdomen, also called the prosoma and opistosoma respectively. This differentiates them from the insects, which have 6 legs and 3 tagmata. Now, if you're squinting at your screen because you see 10 legs, stop it. That's bad for your eyes. Also, their pincers are not legs, they are pedipalps, little appendages by the mouths of arachnids. In Pseudoscorpiones and Scorpiones, they're just very prominent and claw-like. Right away, this is a very unique characteristic that helps to confirm you're looking at a pseudoscorpion. Don't panic that scorpions have them too, because scorpions also have giant venomous tails, which the pseudoscorpions lack. There are some other corner cases, like the whip scorpions, which also have claw-like pedipalps, but something to keep in mind, the pseudoscorpions are tiny, like a few millimeters max. You're more likely to misidentify it because you just can't get a good look at the darn thing. The good news is that these characteristics are pretty reliable, no matter how tiny, even for the babies. During their development, pseudoscorpions don't go through any radical physical changes. They go from egg to juvenile to adult, and the juveniles just look like smaller and often paler versions of the adult. However, you will sometimes see that immature stage split up into protonymph, deutonymph, and tritonymph, so just something to be aware of. Though their physical life cycle is fairly straightforward, ecologically, their behavior and development is a marvel. For one, they are fantastic mothers, and complex parental care is quite odd in the arthropods. Female pseudoscorpions have a specialized brood pouch or brood sac so they can carry their eggs wherever they go. And if this wasn't enough, many pseudoscorpions will then shelter themselves away in silken chambers. So these eggs are in a brood pouch, in a silken hideout, in like a bark crevice. Pseudoscorpion mothers do not mess around. And it isn't just about safety. The embryos are actually being supplied with nutrients from the mother while in that brood pouch. Pseudoscorpions are what we call matrotrophic, meaning the embryos are supplied with their nutrients directly from the female. This is as opposed to most other arthropods, which are licithotrophic, getting their nutrients from yolk inside the egg. Consequently, pseudoscorpion eggs don't have a lot of yolk. After a couple weeks, the eggs will hatch, but the mama pseudoscorpion's job is not done. These freshly hatched pseudoscorps will remain in the brood pouch and feed on a nutritive secretion from the mother, essentially the pseudoscorpion version of milk. This will fully equip them with all the nutrients they need to complete their initial development. Finally, after a week or so, the nymphs will leave the brood pouch. But the mama pseudoscorpion's job is still sometimes not done. One species in the genus Paratemnoides was found to practice matrophagy, with a mother pseudoscorpion seemingly encouraging her young to eat her for their survival. The genus Paratemnoides is weird for multiple reasons. Most pseudoscorpions are solitary in their adult lives, but some species in this genus were shown to live in colonies. Individuals in these colonies will habitate alongside one another and work as a team to gather food and care for young. Even the juveniles chip in by helping to build those silken shelters. Interestingly enough, the adults will take on specific labor roles. These roles aren't physically hard-coded, like in ants or honeybees, but it's still an incredibly complex social structure for an arthropod, with some individuals focusing on reproduction and others focusing on foraging. Or perhaps I should say hunting. Pseudoscorpions are predators, feeding on small invertebrates like springtails, mites, or insect larvae. However, those colony-dwelling Paratemnoides I mentioned will hunt as a pack, so they can take down some pretty large prey in comparison. Their weapon of choice? Their pedipalps. Though they lack the large stinging tails of the scorpions, they have no shortage of venom, instead injecting it through spines on their pedipalps to paralyze their prey, though there are some groups of pseudoscorpion that lack venom glands altogether. After incapacitating their prey, they'll shred the unlucky invert with their chelicerae as they exude digestive enzymes and suck up the resulting liquid. Once they've gotten their fill and they molt to adulthood, they begin to turn their attention to a higher calling: their legacy. Pseudoscorpion sperm transfer is indirect. The male will create a package of sperm, called a spermatophore, for the female to uptake for fertilization. In some cases, the male will directly present this spermatophore, and even do little courtship rituals involving the clasping and vibration of their pedipalps. Other groups will leave them scattered around for a female to stumble upon and hope for the best. Thus the cycle continues. But there is one important aspect of pseudoscorpion behavior we have not yet covered: foracy. Dispersing to a new habitat can be tough when you're the size of a grain of rice and you don't have wings. Sure, you can walk to the neighboring tree, but any farther than that is going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy. Foracy is usually a commensal interaction where one organism hitches a ride on another. The pseudoscorpions aren't parasitizing the host, they just want to see some new sights. This dispersal behavior allows the pseudoscorpions to colonize areas far from their birthplace, and thus avoid competition with their relatives. And I like to imagine they have a little bit of fun along the way too. Well, some groups do have a bit of fun, actually. Some species will kill two birds with one stone and use their hitchhiking time for reproduction. Efficiency, right? Anyway, as mentioned, their presence doesn't really have a negative impact on the hitchhikee, and their overall presence doesn't have a negative impact on us either. Yes, pseudoscorpions are venomous, but you really don't need to worry about it. These little babs can't bite or sting you, and they're not a threat to you or your pets. You'll sometimes find them around old books, hence the name book scorpions, but they're not hurting the books. They're just munching book lice and other small critters running around the archives. And their predaceous life cycle is often a benefit to us, as they can keep mites and other small invertebrate populations in check, and just overall contribute to a balanced ecosystem. So if you want to foster their development on your own property, they need shelter and humidity. So shaded areas with woody debris, leaf litter, mature trees can all provide some optimal nesting sites, and then native plants can encourage diverse invertebrate populations for a consistent food source. With everything that the mama pseudoscorpions have on their plates, I'm sure they'll appreciate the help. Anyways, thank you all for listening. And if you have any favorite groups of pseudoscorpions, or just any fun facts I missed, please leave them in the comments below. I always love hearing about it. Peace, y'all.